Marcus had traded an NBA career for a crumbling gym and a group of kids nobody else wanted to coach. It wasn't much, but it was his. Then the auditor walked in with a clipboard and a deadline, and started counting everything that was wrong with the place. Marcus shifted his weight on the cracked wooden floor, the echo of worn sneakers bouncing through the half-collapsed gym. The basketball hoop above him sagged, the net frayed and uneven, yet it still held its purpose, a stubborn reminder that some things endured despite neglect. Marcus ran his hand over the rim, feeling the rough texture beneath his fingers, a tactile connection to a past life that had once glittered with lights, crowds, and the roar of arenas. That life, an NBA career, accolades, fame, was gone, ended abruptly by a knee injury and the slow descent into despair that followed. Now, his world consisted of these teenagers, their raw energy and untapped potential, and a gym that had seen better days decades ago. A faint, rhythmic click echoed against the hollow gym floor as Ellie entered. She didn't just walk. She navigated the space with the clinical precision of a site surveyor, her polished shoes tracing sharp, geometric lines through the dust. Clipboard held like a shield, she paused at the threshold, her gaze dissecting the room, not as a sanctuary, but as a series of structural liabilities. Every crack, every rusted support beam, every peeling line on the floor drew her attention. She was a professional, a sports medicine auditor from a well-funded foundation, trained to identify risks, to enforce regulations, and to maintain standards that Marcus's world seemed to bypass effortlessly. This place, it doesn't meet safety standards, she said, her tone calm, almost clinical, yet carrying an undeniable note of judgment. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his posture shifting into a defensive, grounded stance he'd practiced for years in the paint. Safe? He asked, his voice low and serrated. Safe is for suburbs and air-conditioned offices where the stakes are a quarterly report. You think you know what it takes to survive out here? To keep these kids focused on a rim instead of a corner? His voice carried over the sounds of a few late-arriving teens, bouncing balls, and the creak of old metal supports. Ellie's lips pressed into a thin line. I have to report violations. That's my responsibility, and I have to keep them training. That's mine. Marcus shot back, the tension coiling like a spring between them. Their worlds collided, two opposing forces, one built on structure, rules, and paper trails, the other forged in grit, resilience, and necessity. Neither was willing to back down. The teens moved around them in the background, dribbling, passing, shouting instructions, and laughing. Marcus barked brief commands. Eyes up. Keep your stance low. Protect the ball. Each word was deliberate, practiced, a mixture of discipline and encouragement. Ellie observed quietly, her pen tracing notes on the clipboard as she monitored for injuries, improper technique, and potential hazards. Beneath her critical gaze, Marcus saw a woman who cared, not for the spectacle, but for the well-being of these kids. And beneath Marcus's rough exterior, Ellie could sense dedication, patience, and a subtle understanding that he was doing more than training skills. He was keeping these teenagers grounded, offering them hope in a place that offered little. The air grew heavy with the collective exertion of practice. Marcus crouched to correct a young player's stance, his knee sending a sharp reminder of the past through his leg, but he ignored it. Ellie moved closer, making careful notes, occasionally offering advice on posture and muscle strain. Their professional disagreement remained, but a fragile respect began to emerge. Neither wanted to admit it aloud, but in the shared space of sweat, effort, and responsibility, they were beginning to see each other's perspective. A long silence fell for a brief moment. The gym, battered and imperfect, seemed to hold its breath, allowing a rare pause in the usual clamor. Marcus leaned against a support beam, wiping sweat from his brow, and Ellie lowered her clipboard, her eyes scanning the teens who now huddled at the far end. You're really doing a lot for them, she said quietly, almost to herself. Marcus met her gaze, the edge of defensiveness still there, but softened. I do what I can. Some of these kids have nowhere else to go. This gym, it's the only thing they've got. Ellie's expression softened, a faint acknowledgement of the weight behind his words. For the first time, the barriers of authority and skepticism thinned. They didn't agree on methods, nor did they have to. But in that moment, both recognized a common goal, the safety growth, and potential of the teenagers in this crumbling gym. The session ended with the teens gathering around Marcus, sweaty, exhilarated, and laughing despite the worn surroundings. Ellie filed her notes, her observations meticulous, yet she allowed a small, private smile. Marcus watched the kids, then glanced toward Ellie, sensing an unspoken understanding. Two very different people, both committed in their own ways, beginning to navigate the fragile beginnings of trust, respect, and perhaps something more. As the doors closed behind Ellie, Marcus stood in the fading light, feeling the familiar weight of the ball and a new, quiet realization. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Over the following weeks, their initial friction ground down into a functional synchronization. He stopped bristling when she adjusted a player's landing mechanics, and she stopped noting the peeling paint, focusing instead on the kinetic chain of the teenagers' movements. They had become a team, even if neither had said it aloud yet. Their first day was a tense orchestration of routines and corrections. Marcus ran the warm-ups with precision, observing each child's technique, while Ellie moved methodically through stretches and preliminary checks. She measured heart rates, inspected knees and shoulders, and made notes on posture. Marcus kept an eye on her, watching how her fingers traced notes on the clipboard, her eyes scanning every minor detail. It was meticulous, almost intrusive, but Marcus gradually recognized the thoroughness behind her strictness. By the end of the day, Ellie had compiled a list of minor issues, some flooring that needed reinforcing, equipment showing wear, and a few minor injuries requiring follow-up attention. Marcus accepted the critiques silently, though his pride bristled. As the days passed, they settled into an uneasy rhythm. Marcus allowed Ellie to intervene when necessary, and she, in turn, started to see the intent and care behind his methods. She noticed how he encouraged the teens after each mistake, how he treated minor failures as teaching moments, never as punishment. One afternoon, a storm rolled over the city, rain streaking the windows with fine mist, and the gym was nearly empty except for the teens who refused to skip practice. Marcus and Ellie stayed late, working together to reorganize equipment for safety and efficiency. During a pause, Ellie adjusted a young player's ankle support while Marcus watched, tense yet patient. "You're really dedicated to these kids," she said softly. Marcus looked at her, his face shadowed in the dim gym light. "They don't have much, but this gym, the work we do here, it's the only thing keeping some of them out of trouble. I can't let them down." Ellie nodded, her professional demeanor cracking just slightly to reveal genuine empathy. "I see that now. It's not just training. They need a foundation, someone who actually cares about them beyond the drills and the scoreboard." Marcus's chest tightened, a mixture of relief and pride. They were beginning to understand each other, not just as colleagues, but as two people committed to a cause bigger than themselves. Evenings became a time for strategy discussions, adjusting practice schedules, reviewing injury prevention, and planning for competitions. Marcus found himself quietly appreciating Ellie's input, the clarity of her assessments, and the unexpected kindness beneath her critical exterior. Ellie, for her part, began to recognize Marcus's resilience, the way he managed frustration without losing patience with the teens, how he balanced discipline with empathy. Through shared labor and mutual respect, the walls of skepticism began to crack. Small victories, a teen mastering a new skill, an injury correctly treated, equipment safely repaired, cemented a fragile trust. Marcus noticed her watching interactions with subtle admiration, and Ellie observed the meticulous care he took in every correction, every encouragement. By the end of the second week, Ellie paused for a moment in the center of the gym, looking around at the worn walls, the bouncing basketballs, and the determined teenagers. Marcus approached, brushing sweat from his brow. "You're starting to understand," he said quietly. "This place, it's more than wood and paint. It's a lifeline." Ellie nodded, the edges of her previous detachment softening. "I think I do now," she admitted, voice low but firm. "And I want to help you keep it that way." Their cooperation, once grudging, had grown into a partnership. Each recognized the other's strengths and vulnerabilities. Marcus saw Ellie's intelligence and dedication. Ellie saw Marcus's determination and the weight he carried silently. The gym, in all its crumbling glory, had become a crucible for their evolving relationship, a place where mutual respect and understanding could take root amidst the ruins. By the end of the month, the Foundation's audit was nearly complete. Ellie had compiled detailed reports and proposed actionable safety improvements, all while observing Marcus's unyielding commitment to the teens. Marcus, in turn, had allowed her influence in small, meaningful ways, realizing that her oversight did not diminish his authority but complemented it. The partnership, once forced, had become functional and, in some subtle, unspoken way, personal. Late one evening, the gym was quiet except for the occasional bounce of a ball and the rhythmic squeak of Marcus's sneakers as he ran drills with the last few lingering teens. Outside, the city lights of Chicago reflected off puddles from an earlier rain, painting the broken windows with streaks of amber and silver. Ellie lingered near the entrance, clipboard in hand, ostensibly finishing her notes, but her gaze kept drifting toward Marcus as he coached, correcting a teen's elbow position, kneeling to adjust a wrist wrap. Each movement was precise, deliberate, a mixture of expertise and care, a man who carried the weight of his past in every gesture. When practice finally ended, the teens filed out, exhausted but laughing, leaving Marcus and Ellie alone in the echoing gym. The tension that had defined their first encounter lingered, transformed now into something quieter, almost tentative. Marcus sank onto a bench, massaging his sore knee, while Ellie moved to check the condition of the mats and equipment one last time. Ellie broke the silence first, her voice barely rising above the low hum of the city outside. "You carry a lot with you," she said, her observation careful, stripped of its clinical distance. Marcus glanced at her, his posture shifting as if bracing for a blow, the instinctual defensiveness of a man used to being judged. "Everyone carries something," he replied, the honesty in his voice cutting through the damp, quiet air of the gym. He didn't elaborate at first, unsure whether he could, or should, share the personal wounds that had brought him here. But the gym, the quiet aftermath of effort, and the absence of judgment seemed to lower the barriers. Marcus spoke of his career-ending injury, the abrupt end to fame, the lingering guilt and depression that had followed. He described the nights when he lay awake, replaying games, missed shots, and opportunities lost. Ellie listened, her posture open, attentive. She didn't interrupt or offer platitudes. Instead, she shared her own burdens. The weight of expectations from her family of surgeons, the constant fear of error, and the pressure of a career where a single mistake could ruin lives. For the first time, the walls between them fell away. The discussion, initially professional, became personal. Their conversation wandered into fears, regrets, and the raw vulnerabilities that rarely left their private thoughts. Marcus found himself laughing softly at a memory he rarely shared, Ellie offering a wry smile at her own anecdote. The laughter was light, almost trembling, but it marked a bridge between two guarded souls. At one point, Ellie handed Marcus a water bottle, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact, fleeting yet electric, sent a jolt neither could ignore. Marcus looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly, uncertainty and curiosity mingling. Ellie caught his glance, and a subtle smile flickered across her face, acknowledgement of a connection neither had planned but both felt deeply. They moved to the windows to watch the city. Rain still fell in scattered sheets, the lake beyond reflecting fractured light. The conversation turned quiet, more intimate, thoughts lingering in pauses rather than words. Marcus admitted, almost in a whisper, that he blamed himself for the abrupt end of his career, that he feared he'd failed not just himself, but all the teens relying on him. Ellie's gaze softened. She shared her fears of failing those who depended on her medical judgment, the constant internal struggle between personal desire and professional duty. In that shared vulnerability, the first sparks of trust, and more, ignited. Both realized the tension between them had evolved. The initial clash of worlds had shifted into cautious understanding, tempered respect, and unspoken attraction. Neither acted on it yet, but the awareness was undeniable, hovering in the charged space of the dimly lit gym. Marcus retrieved a basketball and tossed it lightly toward Ellie, a playful challenge amidst the gravity of their conversation. She caught it, her grip firm yet careful, and a brief, competitive smile passed between them. In that simple, silent exchange, they acknowledged a new dynamic. mutual recognition of skill, empathy, and a curiosity that had grown from mere tolerance to intrigue. By the time they left the gym, the first night of rain-streaked reflections ended. Both felt a subtle shift. The professional boundaries remained, but beneath them, the fragile beginnings of connection, trust, and unspoken emotion had taken root. The gym, in its dilapidated state, had become more than a place of physical training. It had become a crucible for their unfolding story, one that promised conflict, understanding, and the tentative stirrings of something neither had expected. A week later, the rhythm of the gym was interrupted by a sleek black car pulling up outside, its polished surface reflecting the early afternoon sun. Marcus noticed it first, pausing mid-drill with a teen, his eyes narrowing. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, sharply dressed, carrying an aura of controlled charisma and danger. Dominique. The name itself sent a subtle shiver through Marcus's spine. Once his agent, once a friend, once a partner in the glittering chaos of professional basketball, now a ghost from a past life with intentions Marcus did not trust. Dominique's smile was practiced, smooth, unthreatening on the surface but layered with manipulation. He walked into the gym, the echo of his polished shoes stark against the cracked floorboards. "Marcus," he said, voice warm yet edged, "it's been a while. I hear you've been keeping busy." His eyes scanned the gym with a predatory precision, taking in the worn equipment, the teenagers, and finally settling on Ellie, who instinctively straightened, sensing the danger he radiated. Marcus stepped forward, jaw tight. "Dominique, what are you doing here?" His tone was measured, controlled, but beneath it, a storm brewed. Dominique's grin widened slightly. "I'm here to talk business, old friend. I have an opportunity for you, one that could solve a few financial inconveniences." His words were casual, almost friendly, yet every syllable carried an underlying threat. Ellie shifted subtly, sensing the tension, her instincts as a professional alerting her to the unspoken stakes. Marcus remained rigid, his body language defensive, protective. He had learned to read Dominique years ago. The charm was a veneer over ruthless calculation. "I don't want your business," Marcus said firmly, stepping closer to shield the teens. "This gym isn't for sale, and I don't deal in your schemes anymore." Dominique's eyes flickered, calculating, before settling back on Marcus with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I don't want the gym, not exactly," he said smoothly. "I want a kid, one of your promising young players. Help me get him signed with a partner company. Quick money, a win-win. You know the drill." "Besides," Dominique added, his voice dropping to a cold whisper, "you still owe me for that final season, Marcus. When your knee blew out, I lost millions in commissions. I'm just here to collect on a debt the universe forgot to pay." Marcus's stomach tightened. The stakes were high, not just financially but morally. He had dedicated his life to these teens, guiding them safely, keeping them away from exploitation. He would not betray that trust, not for any sum of money. "I won't do it," Marcus said, voice low but unwavering. "Not for you, not for anyone. I've lost enough to know where compromise leads." Dominique's smile sharpened, the charm replaced by a dangerous glint. "I expected as much," he replied. "But know this, Marcus, refusing me doesn't come without consequences." Ellie stepped slightly forward, instinctively protective. "Who is this man?" she demanded. Marcus glanced at her, the weight of unspoken history heavy in his gaze. "Dominique," he said simply. "He used to be someone I trusted. Not anymore." The room felt charged, the energy of old allegiances and new threats colliding. Dominique's tone softened, almost coaxing. "I'm just offering options. Life is about choices, Marcus. Choose wisely." With that, he turned, exiting with the same poised menace he had entered with, leaving behind a palpable tension that clung to the gym like a shadow. The teens sensed it, the subtle shift in Marcus's posture, the quiet but urgent glance he exchanged with Ellie. As the door closed, Ellie exhaled slowly, processing the encounter. Marcus leaned against a support beam, the memory of past betrayals weighing on him. "He's dangerous," Marcus muttered, "and he knows how to get to people. He'll push until he finds a weakness." Ellie nodded, her professional composure unwavering despite the unease. "We'll handle it," she said. Together. Marcus's jaw tightened, the thought of combining forces with her, someone he barely knew, both unsettling and oddly reassuring. The rest of the day passed with an unspoken tension. Marcus pushed the teens harder, a silent need to channel energy, focus, and resilience into something productive. Ellie moved among the players, her eyes vigilant, her presence a quiet counterbalance to the looming threat. The encounter with Dominique had shifted the stakes. The gym was no longer just a place of training. It was a battleground where morals, loyalty, and courage would be tested. By evening, Marcus and Ellie stood alone, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The lake beyond mirrored the fiery hues of dusk, a silent witness to their evolving partnership. "We're going to have to be smart," Marcus said, tone low but firm. "He's not just a threat to me. He's a threat to all of this, to everything we've built here." Ellie's gaze met his, resolute. "Then we'll be smarter. We won't let him win." The shadow of Dominique lingered, but for the first time, Marcus didn't feel entirely alone. Ellie's presence was a new kind of strength, a combination of insight, courage, and empathy that he hadn't anticipated but would now rely on. The gym, the kids, and their fragile alliance with each other became the center of a looming storm, one that promised confrontation, moral tests, and the unearthing of vulnerabilities long buried. A Saturday morning brought an unexpected reprieve from the usual chaos of the gym. The teenagers were attending a city tournament, leaving Marcus and Ellie with the gym to themselves. The quiet was almost unfamiliar, a strange pause that neither of them had anticipated. Marcus stretched slowly, the faint ache in his knee reminding him of the years lost to injury. But the ache was now accompanied by a sense of anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Ellie moved among the scattered equipment, her clipboard set aside, jotting informal notes as much for herself as for the Foundation's record. "Want to get out of here?" Marcus asked suddenly, breaking the silence. His tone was tentative, almost vulnerable. Ellie raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. "Out where?" she asked. He gestured vaguely toward the cityscape, toward the distant shimmer of Lake Michigan. "A walk. Get some air. Talk about something other than drills and injury reports." There was a weight behind the offer, a subtle acknowledgement of the trust and understanding that had begun to form over weeks of shared work. They walked in silence at first, the rhythm of their footsteps against the wet pavement creating a tentative harmony. The lake stretched before them, its surface reflecting clouds tinged with the gold of the morning sun. Marcus finally broke the silence. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," he admitted, voice low. "Like I could start over. Like maybe I deserve more than this guilt, more than just surviving." Ellie glanced at him, noting the honesty in his tone, the rawness that was rarely visible beneath the layers of discipline and control. "I know what you mean," she replied softly. "I've spent most of my life trying not to make mistakes, trying not to let people down. But maybe it's okay to believe in a new start." Her words hung in the air between them, delicate yet weighty, carrying the promise of understanding and connection. Marcus stopped walking, turning toward her. The space between them was charged, an invisible pull that neither could ignore. He reached out, a tentative gesture, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. Ellie's breath caught slightly, but she didn't pull away. Their eyes met, a silent conversation passing between them, acknowledgement, trust, curiosity, and an unspoken willingness to explore something beyond the professional. The first kiss was inevitable, soft, exploratory, a mingling of hesitation and desire. It was a moment suspended in time, the chaos of the outside world muted by the intensity of connection. Marcus felt a sudden, sharp clarity. For the first time in years, the phantom pressure in his chest didn't flare up when he looked at the hoop. He stood taller, his shoulders dropping from their habitual defensive hunch, finally exhaling a breath he felt he'd been holding since the day his NBA career ended. Ellie felt the warmth of shared vulnerability, the acknowledgement that they were more than the sum of their professional roles. Afterwards, they continued walking along the lakeshore, the conversation turning to lighter topics. The quirks of the city, humorous incidents from the gym, reflections on their past lives before the storm of responsibility and expectation had settled on them. Yet beneath the levity, a profound emotional current flowed, binding them together in ways both subtle and unmistakable. Back at the gym later that day, Marcus watched Ellie as she reviewed reports, noting the meticulous attention she paid to detail. He realized he trusted her not just with the gym, but with the fragile lives of the teens and, increasingly, with his own vulnerabilities. Ellie caught his gaze and smiled faintly, an unspoken acknowledgement that their bond had deepened beyond mutual respect into something more intimate, a foundation of emotional support that neither had expected but both were beginning to rely upon. Even as Dominique's shadow lingered on the edges of their awareness, this moment, this quiet interlude of trust, laughter, and connection, served as a reminder of what they were fighting for. Not just the gym, not just the teens, but the possibility of belief in each other, of redemption, of a future that could be shaped by choices grounded in integrity, courage, and mutual care. Marcus finally spoke, breaking the comfortable silence. "We'll need to be ready for him," he said, voice steady but carrying the weight of determination. Ellie nodded, the emotional intimacy of the day blending seamlessly with the practical reality of the challenges ahead. "We will. Together." And in that simple affirmation, the seeds of partnership, love, and resilience took firm root, anchoring them against the turbulence yet to come. The next week began like any other, with Marcus pushing the teens through conditioning drills, the echo of basketballs and the squeak of worn sneakers filling the dim gym. But an uneasy tension hovered in the air, one Marcus couldn't shake. There was something off, small things at first. A packet of supplements left on the counter that he didn't recognize, a subtle shift in the behavior of a few kids, whispers that seemed rehearsed. Ellie arrived mid-morning, carrying her medical kit and clipboard. She noticed the same anomalies, her sharp eyes narrowing as she picked up a discarded vial. "Marcus, these aren't just vitamins," she said, her voice trembling with professional alarm. "This is clenbuterol, a powerful performance enhancer band for minors. If an inspector finds this, you're not just looking at a fine, you're looking at a felony charge for child endangerment." He shook his head, confusion and concern knitting his brows. "No, I haven't touched them, and I don't know how they got here." The weight of the moment pressed on them both. By afternoon, the real assault began. A call came from the Foundation's Oversight Committee, the voice of a colleague of Ellie's laced with concern. The packages had been flagged during a random audit, and questions were being raised about the gym's compliance. Marcus froze, the tension coiling in his chest. "This isn't real. Someone's setting us up," he muttered, rage simmering beneath the surface. Ellie didn't just react. She retreated into her training, her mind running a diagnostic on every liability Marcus now represented. "I've seen foundations pull funding for a fraction of this," she said, her voice stripped of its recent warmth, replaced by a clinical, defensive edge. "The compliance protocols are binary. Marcus, there is no room for setups in an audit report." The shadow of his past scandals, once a footnote, now felt like a looming structural flaw she couldn't ignore. The storm of past scandals in his career weighed heavily on her mind. Could she trust him fully in this moment of crisis? The teens were oblivious to the brewing danger. They continued their drills, laughter and shouts echoing off cracked walls, a stark contrast to the tense, almost claustrophobic atmosphere now dominating the gym. Marcus moved among them with forced composure, adjusting grips, correcting stances, hiding the urgency that clawed at his chest. Every step, every gesture, was a balancing act between maintaining normalcy and confronting the threat undermining everything he had rebuilt. By evening, the situation escalated. An anonymous email, sent directly to the committee overseeing the foundation, contained photos of the supplement packages with claims implicating Marcus in negligence or worse. Ellie read the email alone, her heart sinking. The professional obligation to report and act collided violently with the trust and connection she had developed with Marcus. Her instinct was to protect her career, but her growing bond with him complicated everything. Marcus confronted her quietly, voice low and controlled but heavy with frustration. "Ellie, you know me. You know I wouldn't do this. He's behind it, Dominique. He's trying to destroy us, the gym, everything we've worked for." His eyes searched hers, a plea for belief, for trust. Ellie hesitated, caught between evidence and intuition. The gym, the teens, Marcus's past, all tangled into a web of uncertainty. The night closed in, heavy and oppressive, as the two of them sat in the quiet gym, surrounded by the scent of worn mats and basketball leather. Marcus's hand brushed against Ellie's as they both reached for a stray clipboard, an involuntary contact that sent an electric charge through the tense air. It was a fleeting reminder that beneath the storm of accusations, under the pressure and fear, something human, something deeply connecting, endured. This first strike by Dominique wasn't merely about sabotage. It was psychological warfare, targeting trust, testing integrity, and exposing vulnerabilities. Marcus and Ellie realized the stakes had shifted. The gym wasn't just a training ground. It was a battlefield where moral courage, intellect, and emotional resilience would determine whether they survived the manipulations of a man who knew their weaknesses intimately. As the lights dimmed in the gym, Marcus stood near the center court, eyes fixed on the basket, body tense. Ellie joined him, standing shoulder to shoulder, a silent signal of solidarity. They both understood Dominique's attack was only the beginning. The real challenge was just unfolding, and together they would need to navigate deception, doubt, and danger to protect everything they held dear. 2 days after the first strike, the tension in the gym had grown palpable. Marcus moved among the teens with forced calm, but his mind was elsewhere, calculating, anticipating Dominique's next move. Ellie arrived mid-morning, carrying her medical bag, her face composed but her eyes sharp, scanning the gym for anomalies. She had barely slept, the anonymous accusations gnawing at her professionalism, and the rising conflict within her conscience. The confrontation came abruptly. Dominique appeared at the entrance, impeccably dressed, his smile sharp and cold. He didn't announce himself with the casual charm of his previous visit. Instead, he stepped forward with deliberate authority, exuding control over the situation. "Ellie," he said, voice smooth but carrying undeniable weight. "I thought it best to speak with you directly." Marcus's body tensed, a protective instinct flaring. Dominique extended a thin manila folder, sliding it across the counter toward Ellie. "These documents demonstrate, rather clearly, that Marcus has been manipulating the system, using the gym, the kids, laundering money under the guise of a charitable program. Your license, your career, it's all at stake if this becomes public." Ellie's fingers hovered over the folder. Her gut screamed caution, her professional instincts warning of disaster. Marcus stepped closer, eyes flashing with quiet rage. "Don't touch that. None of it is true. He's framing us." Dominique's smile widened, calculated and unyielding. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "I'm offering a choice. You can walk away quietly. Let the situation resolve itself without jeopardizing your career. Or you can trust Marcus and risk everything you've worked for. The decision is yours." His gaze flicked toward Marcus, lingering, taunting, daring him to react. Ellie's mind raced. As a medical professional, she had dedicated her life to integrity and precision. But the evidence before her, the timing, the sophistication, it was compelling. Fear pressed against her judgment. Could she risk her entire career on trust alone? The folder felt heavier than any medical instrument she had ever held. Marcus reached out, voice low and urgent. "Ellie, it's a lie. He's manipulating you. Trust me. Please." For a tense moment, time seemed to stretch. Ellie's breathing was shallow. She glanced at Marcus, seeing the strain in his posture, the depth of his commitment not only to the teens, but to protecting her from harm. Her professional resolve collided with human instinct, the part of her that had begun to care, to trust, to connect. Dominique's presence magnified the pressure, a masterclass in psychological warfare. "Think carefully," he whispered, leaning slightly closer, his tone both persuasive and menacing. "One wrong move, and it's all over. Your reputation, your future, gone." He withdrew then, leaving the folder in front of her and retreating toward the door with a deliberate, controlled grace that made his threat linger even in absence. Ellie's hands trembled as she closed the folder without looking inside. She turned to Marcus, her gaze steady but conflicted. I want to believe you," she said quietly, "but it's too convincing. I don't know if I can ignore it." Marcus's jaw tightened. He had anticipated challenges, confrontations, even physical threats, but this assault on trust was designed to fracture their alliance, to plant doubt in the one person he had begun to rely on. The day passed in a haze of tension. Marcus continued coaching, his every action measured, his interactions with Ellie laden with unspoken appeals for belief. Ellie observed quietly, torn between professional caution and the growing connection that had begun to define their partnership. The night ended with a silent resolve. Marcus tightened the straps on his sneakers, preparing mentally for the battles ahead. Ellie packed her medical kit, determination mingling with fear. They would face Dominique's machinations together, navigating deception, doubt, and danger with only trust, resilience, and each other as anchors. The following morning, the gym felt heavy, almost oppressive. Marcus arrived early, his knee aching more than usual, the strain from training and tension weighing on him. The teens trickled in, unaware of the storm brewing outside the cracked walls, bouncing balls echoing in the empty corridors. Every thud, every squeak of worn sneakers reminded Marcus of the fragility of what he had built and the fragility of the trust now under siege. Ellie was already there, her posture rigid, eyes scanning every corner of the gym. She hadn't slept well. Dominique's manipulations gnawed at her confidence, exploiting her fear of professional ruin. Marcus approached cautiously. "Ellie," he began, but she held up a hand. "Don't. Not now," she said. Her voice was calm, but beneath it simmered a storm of doubt and fear. By mid-morning, the consequences of Dominique's blackmail became unavoidable. The Foundation had frozen all funding, citing the ongoing investigation. Marcus's chest tightened at the words, every heartbeat a drum of anxiety. The gym, once filled with laughter and energy, now felt hollow, the silence pressing down like a weight. He moved among the teens, trying to maintain composure, but the tension was palpable. Every glance, every whisper seemed magnified, a reminder that their sanctuary was at risk. Ellie's internal conflict reached a climax. Dominique's claims, paired with the frozen accounts, had shaken her deeply. Her hands trembled as she handled the gym's files, her mind a battlefield between professional caution and emotional loyalty. Finally, unable to contain her fear, she voiced it. I can't stay here. Not like this." The words hung in the air, heavy and final, a dagger to Marcus's heart. Marcus froze, the sting of betrayal sharp, but muted by understanding. "Ellie, wait. Please, don't make a decision based on fear. You know me. You know the truth." But her eyes, clouded with doubt and anxiety, avoided his. She packed her things swiftly, each movement deliberate, distancing herself not just physically but emotionally. That night, sitting in her sterile, quiet apartment, Ellie stared at the folder Dominique had given her. Her finger hovered over the report button on her laptop, but then she saw a smudge of gym dust on her cuff. She remembered Marcus's hands, not as a criminal's, but as the hands that caught a falling kid during a drill. She closed her eyes, realizing that a perfect audit was worthless if it cost a man his soul. She reopened her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keys. She began to cross-reference the timestamps of the anonymous emails with the GPS data from her own facility visits. She noticed a pattern. The emails were always sent exactly 20 minutes after Dominique had left the gym. It was too precise, too orchestrated. For the next 6 hours, she ignored her career protocols, diving into the metadata of the attachments until she found the routing path, a server used by Dominique's private firm. The doubt that had nearly broken her was replaced by a cold, clinical fury. The gym, the teens, Marcus, it all seemed to collapse under the weight of Dominique's manipulations. That night, sitting in her sterile, quiet apartment, Ellie stared at the folder Dominique had given her. Her finger hovered over the report button on her laptop, but then she saw a smudge of gym dust on her cuff. She remembered Marcus's hands, not as a criminal's, but as the hands that caught a falling kid during a drill. She closed its covers, realizing that a perfect audit was worthless if it cost a man his soul. She reopened her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keys. She began to cross-reference the timestamps of the anonymous emails with the GPS data from her own facility visits. The doubt that had nearly broken her was replaced by a cold, clinical fury. Dominique, watching from the shadows, smirked as he anticipated the fracture he had orchestrated. He now demanded Marcus turn over the gym for illicit purposes, a direct assault on everything Marcus held dear. The pressure was suffocating, the temptation to surrender immense. Marcus stood in the center of the court, jaw clenched, fists tight, eyes scanning the empty bleachers. The gym, his sanctuary and his battlefield, now felt like a trap. Yet, even in despair, resolve burned. Marcus knew surrender would mean more than personal defeat. It would betray the teens who relied on him. He moved among them, reinforcing drills, speaking quietly but firmly, projecting strength he didn't fully feel. Every instruction, every correction was a reminder that his responsibility extended beyond himself, that he had a duty to fight. Ellie's absence was a hollow echo, but it also sharpened his determination. He could not, would not, allow Dominique to succeed. The first fractures in trust, though painful, became fuel for a strategy grounded in resilience. Marcus began planning, mentally tracing every move Dominique could make, envisioning counteractions, considering allies, and leveraging connections he had long set aside. As night fell, Marcus remained alone in the gym, the echoes of bouncing balls replaced by the silence of anticipation. The battle was no longer just about compliance or funding. It was about survival, integrity, and reclaiming the bonds fractured by deceit. He clenched his fist, the ache in his knee a reminder of past losses and lessons learned. Dominique had taken a step forward, but Marcus's response would be precise, patient, and relentless. In the quiet, Marcus whispered to himself, a promise and a vow intertwined. I won't let this place fall. I won't let him win. And I won't lose her. The gym, scarred and worn, stood as a testament to struggle and perseverance. It had witnessed beginnings, trials, and now it would witness the decisive steps toward justice, truth, and reclamation of hope. The day of the final match arrived under a gray, overcast sky, the kind that weighed heavy on the heart and set nerves on edge. The gym, though scarred from years of wear and the recent turmoil, had been polished and readied for the big event. Marcus moved among the teens, adjusting jerseys, offering last-minute tips, his demeanor calm but tense, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to snap. The stakes were higher than the game itself. The integrity of the gym, the teens' futures, and the fragile trust between him and Ellie all hung in the balance. Ellie arrived earlier than expected, having spent the night tracing Dominique's network of deceit. Every call, email, and subtle lead she had unearthed pointed to a single truth. The accusations were fabricated. Dominique's empire of manipulation depended on secrecy and the illusion of credibility, and she now held the key to exposing it. Her hands were steady, her mind sharp, and her heart pounding, not from fear, but from determination. Marcus noticed her immediately, a flicker of relief crossing his features. You found it? He asked quietly, eyes scanning the crowd for signs of Dominique. Ellie nodded, pulling a small folder from her bag, filled with concrete evidence. Bank transfers, falsified emails, and corroborating statements from insiders. Every claim he made, she whispered, is provable as a lie. The gym doors opened, and Dominique entered, dressed impeccably, projecting confidence and control. He moved among the spectators, his gaze constantly flicking to Marcus and Ellie, a predator assessing the terrain before the kill. He believed his trap was set, that the combination of doubt, fear, and professional risk would fracture their alliance once more. But he underestimated their preparation and resolve. The match began, and it was a grueling test of nerves. Marcus watched as his star point guard, Leo, hesitated under pressure, glancing nervously at Dominique in the stands. Marcus signaled a specific play, the anchor, a defensive move they'd practiced specifically for when the game fell out of control. As Leo executed a perfect steal, Marcus realized that honesty was their anchor. He wasn't just coaching a game. He was watching these boys prove that discipline could overcome the chaos Dominique tried to sow. Ellie watched from the sidelines, eyes darting to Dominique, then back to the court, signaling discreetly to Marcus when critical moments approached. Their silent coordination became a dance, blending strategy, intuition, and trust. As the clock ticked down, Dominique attempted his final move. He approached the committee representatives in attendance, preparing to present falsified documents and a carefully rehearsed narrative of alleged misconduct. But before he could act, Ellie stepped forward, her voice firm and clear, cutting through the tension. These documents are fraudulent, she announced, producing her folder of verified evidence. The room fell silent, the weight of truth halting Dominique in his tracks. I've already alerted the authorities, Dominique, Ellie added, her voice echoing in the gym. The laundering documents you provided were created on a trial version of software registered to your own firm's IP address. You didn't just frame him, you left a digital fingerprint on the weapon. Dominique didn't flinch. Instead, he let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut through the gym's silence. A digital fingerprint? Please. Any first-year IT student can spoof an IP, he said, turning his gaze toward the committee with practiced ease. What's more likely? That a high-level sports agent personally hacked a local gym, or that a medical auditor, who has been seen sharing intimate moments with the suspect after hours, is fabricating evidence to protect her lover? Check the security cameras from the lakeshore. Their professional boundaries dissolved weeks ago. Her entire report is a conflict of interest. Ellie's face went pale for a second, but she held her ground. I expected you to go low, Dominique. That's why I didn't just bring the IP logs. She pulled a second, smaller device from her pocket, a digital recorder. This is a recording of our meeting from 2 days ago. It's a bit muffled because it was in my bag, but at the 4-minute mark, you clearly state, and I quote, "Your license is at stake if you don't let the situation resolve itself." That's not an audit discussion, Dominique. That's extortion. And the committee isn't the only one listening. I've already sent the raw file to the state's attorney. Ellie didn't just present papers. She calmly explained to the committee that Dominique's arrogance had been his undoing. He had assumed Ellie would be too terrified of losing her license to actually look at the files he provided. Because of that overconfidence, the digital signatures on his evidence were lazily masked, traced back to a spoofed server registered under his own firm's corporate umbrella. It was a technical checkmate, a predator's mistake of underestimating his prey, that left no room for his silver-tongued excuses. Marcus seized the moment. During a timeout, he spoke quietly to his team, the urgency in his voice mirrored in their eyes. Focus. Play smart. Every move counts. The teens responded with precision, executing plays they had drilled countless times. Dominique, realizing his scheme was unraveling, grew visibly agitated, his calm facade cracking. Ellie continued to present the evidence, detailing the falsified emails, manipulated bank statements, and orchestrated threats. The committee members conferred quickly, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Dominique's smirk faltered, replaced by panic as the weight of exposure settled upon him. He looked around the gym, searching for a single face that showed doubt, but found none. Even the teenagers stood still, their sweaty faces set in defiance. They weren't just a background for his scheme anymore. They were a wall he couldn't climb. For the first time, the broken gym didn't look like a liability. It looked like a fortress. The crowd, initially unaware of the underlying drama, began to sense the tension, their murmurs swelling into whispers of concern. In the final minutes of the match, Marcus's team executed a flawless play, scoring the decisive basket. The whistle blew, signaling not only the end of the game, but the culmination of months of struggle, deception, and resilience. Dominique's attempts to manipulate the outcome had failed spectacularly, his schemes laid bare before everyone present. Marcus and Ellie met eyes across the court, a shared glance of relief, triumph, and unspoken understanding passing between them. After the match, Dominique was escorted out, facing both legal repercussions and public scrutiny. Marcus addressed the committee, presenting additional context and assuring them of the gym's ongoing integrity. Ellie stood beside him, a steady presence and a witness to the truth, her support unwavering. Together, they had navigated the storm, proving not only their professional and personal resilience, but also the power of trust, collaboration, and courage under pressure. As the gym emptied, the teens celebrated, unaware of the full gravity of the events they had played through but sensing the victory, both on the court and in life. Marcus and Ellie lingered, the weight of recent trials giving way to cautious optimism. The gym, scarred but undefeated, had survived, and with it, the fragile but growing bond between them. The aftermath of the final match left the gym in a quiet, reflective mood. The echo of bouncing balls had faded, replaced by a calm that seemed almost surreal after weeks of tension, manipulation, and fear. Marcus walked slowly across the polished floor, fingers grazing the worn edges of the court lines, feeling the history and struggle embedded in every crack and scuff. The teens lingered nearby, chatting in low tones, their energy subdued but filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Ellie arrived just as Marcus began tidying equipment. Her steps were measured, her expression soft yet determined. She approached him, holding a small medical folder. "The gym is safe," she said gently. "And so are you, Marcus. Everything Dominique tried to destroy has been exposed, and now you can finally move forward." Marcus looked at her, exhaustion and relief mingling in his gaze. "Thanks to you," he admitted. "I don't know what I would have done without you here." They walked together to the bleachers, the quiet hum of the city beyond the windows, a gentle reminder that life continued outside these walls. Ellie's eyes scanned the gym, lingering on the court where countless victories, both small and large, had been forged. "You've built something remarkable here," she said. "These kids, this place, it's more than a gym. It's hope." Marcus nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It's been hard," he admitted. "I thought I'd lost everything after my injury. But this, seeing them, guiding them, it's worth it. And now, I can finally take the next step." Ellie tilted her head, sensing the weight behind his words. "The operation?" she asked softly. Marcus winced slightly. The very thought of a hospital room brought back the cold day his career shattered. For years, he realized, he had held on to the injury like a shield. As long as he was broken, he was a tragic hero, a man destined for greatness, cheated by fate. Healing meant he'd have to face the world without that excuse. But looking at Ellie, he realized he finally trusted someone else's hands as much as he used to trust his own on the court. He wasn't just fixing a knee. He was clearing the last hurdle of his past, trading the comfort of a tragedy for the risk of a new beginning. Marcus exhaled, nodding. "Yeah, I've avoided it for too long. But I trust you. I trust myself to take this chance now, to heal properly, and maybe, finally live without regret." Ellie reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his face, her touch gentle yet firm. "We'll do it together," she said. "I'll be with you every step of the way." The gym, once a site of conflict and tension, now felt like a sanctuary reborn. The scars of the past weeks remained. Broken equipment, the faint smell of sweat and disinfectant, the echoes of confrontations. But they no longer carried the weight of fear. Instead, they symbolized resilience, the triumph of dedication, and the bonds forged under pressure. Marcus and Ellie spent the next few days planning the gym's future. Repairs and renovations were underway, funded by renewed support from the foundation and local community members inspired by the teens' perseverance. Together, they drafted a vision for a new sports academy, one grounded in honesty, mentorship, and opportunity rather than victory at any cost. They discussed curriculum, training programs, and ethical standards, their collaboration seamless, fueled by trust and shared purpose. Evenings were quieter now. Marcus and Ellie often stayed late, reviewing plans or simply walking the empty streets along Lake Michigan. On one such evening, they paused on the shoreline, the wind carrying the scent of the water and the soft crash of waves. Marcus looked at Ellie, the first rays of sunset casting a warm glow across the horizon. "We made it through," he said, voice low but steady. "Not just the gym, us two." Ellie smiled, her hand finding his. "Yes," she replied. "And now, we build something even stronger. Together." Their eyes met, a quiet understanding passing between them. The struggles, the doubts, and the betrayals had not broken them. Instead, they had forged a connection grounded in mutual respect, courage, and love. The gym doors closed behind them that evening, not as an ending, but as a promise of the future. Marcus's knee would be repaired, the academy would grow, and the lessons of perseverance, integrity, and trust would echo through every drill, every game, and every decision made within those walls. Marcus and Ellie, once brought together by conflict and crisis, now stood united, ready to face the world with renewed hope and unwavering determination. In the quiet that followed, Marcus whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, "This is only the beginning." Ellie squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The gym, the teens, their dreams, all were safe, nurtured, and ready to thrive. And finally, Marcus allowed himself to believe in a future where healing, love, and purpose could coexist without fear.